The drums beat softly as the villagers rushed toward the grass-thatched church, eager yet cautious. Women adjusted their headscarves, pulling them tight, while children clung to their mothers, eyes wide with anticipation. Tonight, the pastor would call upon miracles, and none wished to miss it. A hush fell as Pastor Makoko stepped forward, his eyes burning with intensity. His voice thundered, "The devil watches, waiting for the weak." The crowd trembled. He lifted his hands high, a signal none dared ignore. "Close your eyes. Let no one challenge God's will." Fear wrapped around the villagers like an unseen chain. Not a single eyelid lifted. A woman wailed, her blind son suddenly cried out, "Mama, I can see." Gasps filled the air as a crippled man stumbled forward, then stood tall. Makoko smiled, nodding, watching faith ignite like fire. Another miracle. Another proof of his power. The congregation erupted in praise, bodies swaying, voices raised in hallelujahs. Not just the poor but the wealthy knelt before him. Gold rings glinted in the candlelight as merchants laid down silver at his feet. "Pastor, bless my business." The plea rang through the air. Makoko did not hesitate, his eyes gleaming as his fingers closed around the offerings. Some villagers exchanged wary glances. Why did he always demand their eyes remain shut? If God's miracles were real, why must they be unseen? Doubt flickered, a whisper barely formed before fear silenced it. To question Makoko meant challenging fate itself. His voice darkened. To defy God is to invite doom. His hand pointed toward an empty space, yet the villagers felt its weight. The enemy lingers, waiting for those who disbelieve. The silence thickened, fear tightening its grip. Those who doubt shall pay a price, even with their lives. A shiver passed through the crowd. No one spoke. No one dared defy him. A thick cloud of dust rose beneath weary steps, clinging to worn sandals like a silent shadow. Eyes scanned the village, watching as whispers passed between cautious lips. Heads tilted, bodies leaned close, and hushed voices murmured a name wrapped in both fear and reverence. No one spoke it loudly, but its weight settled in the air like an unshakable presence. A scoff cut through the silence. Miracles? Or just another trick? An elder leaned forward at a roadside stall, voice barely above a breath. Makoko has the gift of the gods. Fingers traced the rim of a wooden bowl, the words carried as though sacred. A woman nearby lowered her basket, shaking her head. The blind see, the crippled walk, but never open your eyes when he prays. The caution sat heavy between them, yet curiosity flickered like a restless flame. An eyebrow lifted. Skepticism remained, but intrigue took root. A decision formed. Firm and unwavering. The only way to know truth from lies was to witness it firsthand. Feet joined the steady flow of villagers, following the path leading to the grass-thatched church. The air thickened, not with heat or dust, but something unseen. A weight pressed down, heavier than footsteps, heavier than breath. Expectation? No, something more. Fear. The church stood, simple yet commanding, its presence stretching beyond the woven walls. Lanterns flickered, light dancing against thatch, sending long shadows creeping along the ground. Small, yet within it loomed something greater, something unseen but deeply felt. The air stirred, waiting. Eyes searched the dim glow, watching as a figure stepped forward, standing above the faithful like a towering force. The voice struck like thunder. "Close your eyes." The words echoed, sinking deep, wrapping tight around each soul present. Do not tempt the devil. Bodies stiffened. Heads bowed. Obedience came swift and unquestioned. Eyelids shut tight, fear sealing them closed as if pried open by unseen hands. Punishment would follow. Not a breath dared defy the command. One did. A tilt of the head, the smallest crack of an eye. A shadow moved, not of light but of flesh. Not in prayer, but in motion. Hands moved swiftly, fingers grasping at offerings, coins slipping into unseen places. The motions were hurried, practiced, untouched by the spirit they claimed to serve. Was this faith or fraud? The question beat alongside a racing heart, the stillness cracked. A sudden snap of the head. Eyes that once commanded now searched, narrowing. Piercing through the veil of silence. The weight of suspicion landed like a stone, heavy and suffocating. The gaze bore down, unyielding, searching for the one who dared to disobey. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken challenge. Then it found its mark. Woven baskets, gleaming coins, and fresh yams piled high before the altar. Goats bleated softly, tied together, waiting to be claimed. A heavy bag of silver dropped onto the heap, followed by another and another. Hands stretched forward, surrendering their last grains of hope. The weight of sacrifice filled the air as voices rose in prayer. Give, and the heavens shall bless you. The call thundered through the church. The Lord rewards the faithful. The smile that followed never reached the eyes. Fingers moved swiftly, snatching each offering with practiced ease, disappearing into hidden folds. The more they gave, the greater their faith. Or so they believed. A steady gaze cut through the gathering, watching. While heads bowed and hands clasped, one pair of eyes remained open. The so-called miracles happened only when all eyes were shut. Why? What was he hiding? Coins vanished as quickly as they were given. Steps were light but hurried. There was no hesitation, only hunger. Something stirred, but no one else saw it. The weight of worship held them down, blind in their devotion. Only one watched, only one questioned. The last bundle of coins was scooped up, but the hands that took them trembled. The grip faltered. Fingers tightening, knuckles turning pale. Eyes darted, scanning the room, checking, searching. Were they being watched? No one dared to look up. No one but one. The moment stretched, the burden of stolen faith heavy in the air. A pause too long, a movement too quick. But still, silence. No voice dared to challenge, no tongue brave to speak. The moment passed, and with it, the chance to question. The words continued, flowing like a river, carrying the people with them. The Spirit moves among us. A voice rang out, strong, commanding. Faith is being rewarded. The faithful swayed, lost in worship, swept away by unseen forces. Lips moved in silent prayers, hands reached toward the heavens, but the weight of doubt lingered beneath the surface. One looked around, eyes scanning the room, searching for a sign. A sea of bowed heads, unwavering, untouched by hesitation. To them, this was truth. But the cracks had begun to show. A pause. A sharp breath. A shift in the air. The words faltered, if only for a moment. Something felt off. Something was wrong. The stillness stretched, wrapping around the room like a tightening noose. Eyes swept the crowd, searching, hunting. A presence lingered, unseen yet felt. Something did not belong. The words resumed, but the voice carried unease, the certainty wavering beneath the surface. A whisper of doubt had slipped through the cracks, and now it could not be ignored. A gaze hardened, piercing through the veil of devotion. A single figure stood out, unmoving, unbowed. A moment passed, heavy and unspoken. The air grew thick. The drums outside slowing, as if the world held its breath. A name was not needed. The eyes had found their mark. The weight of authority crashed down like thunder. The command tore through the silence. You dared to disobey. Gasps filled the space, bodies recoiling, feet shuffling backward. The accusation struck deep, carrying the weight of divine wrath. The villagers stepped away, creating space between themselves and the one who had broken the sacred rule. The eyes had seen, and now judgment would follow. Arms tightened around small bodies, shielding them from the unseen curse. Mothers held their children close, whispering prayers, fearful of what would come next. An elder lowered his head, voice barely above a breath. He has challenged God. The words carried through the crowd, sealing fate. All eyes turned, locked in silent horror. No one spoke. No one moved. They watched, waiting for the wrath to fall, for the heavens to answer. The weight of fear crushed the air. The moment stretched, unbearable. Judgment would come. It had to, hands lifted, eyes blazing with fury, the weight of judgment pressed down on the gathering. The voice echoed, swallowing the air with its power. You have defied God. You will not see the sun rise again. The words cut deep, wrapping themselves around every soul present. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd, bodies shifting, feet stepping back. A space formed, empty yet heavy with fear, as though death itself had already claimed its mark. Whispers slithered through the night, crawling into homes, filling the spaces between breaths. Mothers clutched their children, eyes wide with dread. Makoko has spoken. The curse will come true. Elders shook their heads, faces lined with certainty. The boy has sealed his fate. No one doubted, no one questioned. The air was thick with the unshakable truth. Once condemned, there was no escape. A chuckle broke the silence, dry and unshaken. Arms folded, a stance unbothered. A curse? From a man who steals while you pray? The words struck like a slap, ringing louder than the priest's decree. A shudder passed through the onlookers. To mock Makoko was unthinkable, a sin beyond reckoning. Eyes darted between the two, between the one who spoke of death and the one who did not fear it. This was not how things were supposed to go. The moon climbed higher, painting the village in silver. Shadows stretched long, whispering secrets against the walls. Sleep came slow, uneasy, burdened by the weight of what was to come. Some prayed, voices barely above a breath, pleading for mercy. Others waited, listening for the sound of fate taking what it was owed. The night dragged on, the silence pressing down like a smothering hand. A single cry shattered the stillness. The roosters called to the morning, their voices ringing out, oblivious to the death that should have come. The sky blushed with light, but hesitation held the village captive. No one moved, no one spoke. Is he gone? The question drifted. Fragile, uncertain. Then, a sound. Not a wail, not a mourning cry, but gasps, sharp, disbelieving. There, in the marketplace, where the dead had no business walking, he stood. A stride easy and confident, a face untouched by fear. A smile, broad and careless, greeting those frozen in place. A coin passed to a vendor, fingers brushing over fruit, laughter spilling like water. No pain, no suffering, no curse fulfilled. The people watched, breath caught in their throats, eyes refusing to blink. But he was supposed to die. Doubt took its first breath, slipping through cracks that had never been there before. How can this be? The words were quiet, but they spread like fire. Makoko has never been wrong before. The certainty that had bound them for so long loosened its grip, just enough to let the question settle. It was small, a flicker against the wind, but it was there. For the first time, people wondered. A shadow moved, sweeping into the space before the flames could catch. A cloak billowed, a staff struck against the ground. Do not be deceived. The voice boomed, chasing away the doubt before it could take hold. This is a test. The enemy is among us. The shift was swift, the murmurs fading, eyes snapping back to their place of worship. The words took root where fear had begun to loosen. The people, once unsure, nodded. Of course. Of course. This was a test. It had to be done. A slow scan, eyes moving through the crowd, searching, choosing. The weight of the moment stretched, hanging like a blade. Then, a finger pointed. A name spoken. You. You have sinned. Your voice shall be stolen. A gasp, a clutch at the throat. Eyes wide, lips parted, but no sound. Nothing. Terror crackled. In the air, crawling up spines, settling back into its place of power. The murmurs ceased, the breath of doubt exhaled. The proof was here. The fear returned. The village trembled once more. The air hummed with whispers, each voice carrying the same name. The tales had spread far, reaching even those who had never stepped foot inside the grass-thatched church. The blind could see. The crippled could walk. The sick found healing where medicine had failed. Yet, through all the stories, one rule remained unchanged. Eyes must remain shut. Faith required it. A step forward, a heart uncertain. If his miracles were real, why must they be unseen? The voice boomed, swallowing doubt before it could settle. Close your eyes, my children. Let no one disobey. The crowd bowed instantly, heads lowering, hands clasping together. Fear pressed against them, holding them in place. The command left no room for hesitation, no space for uncertainty. But fingers twitched, resisting the weight of obedience. Faith demanded trust. But trust required proof. A breath held, a head tilting, the smallest crack of an eye. The flickering light revealed a figure moving, not in prayer, but in collection. Hands swept across the offerings, fingers closing around gold and grain, movements hurried yet precise. Not the work of a man calling upon divine power, but one gathering his own. A gasp, sharp but stifled. A truth glimpsed, too fleeting to deny. Was it possible? Had the warning been real? A sudden stillness, a shift in the air. The words faltered, hesitation breaking the rhythm. A presence felt, unseen but certain. The movement ceased. The weight of judgment turned, eyes scanning, searching. The breath that had been held escaped too soon. You dared to open your eyes? The voice trembled, but it was not with uncertainty. It carried the force of accusation, the finality of condemnation. A step forward, a gaze burning, a truth undeniable. A silence stretched, waiting, daring for a defense that would not come. From this moment, your voice is stolen. You shall not speak again. The words struck like lightning, tearing through the gathering. Gasps rippled outward, bodies shifting. Heads turning. No one questioned, no one doubted. The decree had been spoken. The sentence had been cast. The air thickened with fear, wrapping around the accused, closing in, suffocating. A mouth opened, a cry forming, but no sound followed. A throat tightened, hands clutching, a face twisted in silent horror. The words had vanished, stolen in the moment they were needed most. Makoko's power was undeniable. The proof stood before them, mouth moving, voice absent. A judgment delivered without question. A fate sealed without mercy. The crowd trembled, faith and fear merging into one. Some fell, knees pressing against the ground, hands rising in desperate prayer. Others whispered, voices shaking, breath uneven. No one must disobey again. The curse had been spoken, and the punishment was clear. No one would question. No one would challenge. Silence was safer. Obedience was survival. The village had seen, and the village believed. The market hummed with voices, but the joy that once filled its air had faded. Whispers crept between stalls, slipping between baskets of yams and woven cloth. We give and give, yet the church still leaks when it rains. A sigh carried through the crowd, weary, tired of waiting. A furrowed brow, a glance toward the distance. And why does Makoko's house shine like a palace? A hush followed, heavy with unspoken thoughts. No one answered. No one dared. Bags of grain stacked high, goats tied together, coins placed into waiting hands. The people brought their offerings, their best, their only. Faith required sacrifice, but the ground beneath their knees remained the same, hard. Dry, untouched by the blessings they were promised. Surely, a man of God would care for his flock? The words slipped out, barely above a breath, quickly lost in the rustle of moving feet. No one looked up. No one wanted to see. A quick shuffle of feet, a gasp cut short. A goat darted forward, slipping free, hooves kicking dust into the air. A boy chased after it, arms outstretched, breath heavy with frustration. Past the church, past the low fences, past the towering trees. Then a halt, a sharp intake of breath. Beyond the branches, behind the veil of leaves, stood a house larger than any in the village. Lanterns glowed, casting light against polished wood, against carved pillars, against wealth unseen. This was no humble home. Eyes widened, feet stumbled back, heart pounding with the weight of discovery. A turn, a sprint, a voice breathless with urgency. "You won't believe what I saw." The words spread, slipping between walls, floating through the air like smoke. Some scoffed, shaking their heads, unwilling to let doubt take root. "If we doubt him, we doubt God." The words came fast, sharp, cutting down hesitation before it could rise. Others shifted, uneasy, eyes flickering with uncertainty. "But what if we are being deceived?" The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the silence. The moon hung high, the village quiet, but not all slept. Shadows moved, gathering behind a hut, voices hushed but urgent. "We must know where the offerings go." The words felt heavier in the dark, carried only by those who dared to listen. A shift, a nervous glance. "If Makoko finds out, we're doomed." A silence followed, thick with fear. The wind whispered through the trees, but no one moved. No one spoke. A deep breath, a decision waiting to be made. "We need proof." A pause. A hesitation. But feet remained planted, hands stayed by sides. The truth lay ahead, within reach, yet no one stepped forward. Fear held its grip, wrapping around them like a silent chain. The night stretched long, waiting, but the village remained still. The truth was close. But no one was brave enough to face it. Hands stretched high, voice ringing through the air, the promise of miracles soared above the gathered crowd. "Tonight, you shall witness wonders like never before." Cheers erupted, faces lifting with hope, hands clutching the frail, the sick, the broken. The grass-thatched church overflowed, villagers pressing close, eyes gleaming with desperate belief. Some had traveled for miles, their hearts heavy with prayers unanswered. But tonight, they would not leave empty-handed. Tonight, Makoko would deliver. A frail blind man was led forward, feet shuffling, hands trembling. The whispers of the crowd hushed as he stood before the one they called a prophet. Arms lifted, fingers pressing gently over unseeing eyes. A voice murmured, words rolling low, rhythmic, wrapping around the expectant silence. The moment stretched, breath held, faith teetering on the edge of belief. Then, a sharp gasp, a cry breaking free. "I can see. I can see." The crowd roared, bodies moving in rhythm, feet stomping, hands clapping, a wave of praise washing over the gathering. The miracle had been witnessed. The power of faith had spoken. The once blind man did not linger. He ran, stumbling with joy. Arms flailing, desperate to share his newfound sight. He vanished into the night, but his absence was brief. Moments later, he returned, dragging another forward, a brother, a mirror image, though his eyes remained clouded. "Help him too." The plea rang out, strong, urgent. The crowd parted, hearts pounding, eyes hungry for yet another sign from above. The proof stood before them, undeniable. If one could be healed, so could another. A hesitation. A flicker of something unseen. The smile faltered, the once bold stance wavering for the briefest moment. Eyes darted, hands tightened, searching for an answer. Some miracles take time, like mobile data activation. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but not all joined in. Some exchanged glances, quiet, thoughtful. A shift, small but present. The first crack in the unshakable belief, the air carried whispers, low, uncertain. Why was one healed instantly, but not the other? A voice, cautious, questioning. An elder frowned, fingers stroking his chin. Does faith have an expiration date? The laughter dimmed, the noise settling into something heavier, something less certain. Eyes flickered toward the front, watching, waiting, wondering. The ground beneath them felt different now that a shadow moved, a figure passing through the dimly lit path beyond the church. Steps faltered, ears catching a sound that should not have been there. Laughter, deep and familiar. The heartbeat quickened. A voice carried through the night, smooth, easy, relaxed. The name spoke aloud in trust within. The church, now spoken in jest under the glow of lanterns. A slow, careful step forward, breath shallow, ears straining. A peek through the wooden gaps, hands pressing against the wall, silent as the night itself. Two figures sat close, bowls half full, drinks swaying between fingers. One leaned forward, eyes gleaming, lips curling into a smirk. "You played your part well today." A chuckle, low and knowing. A hand moved, a thick bundle of cash sliding across the wooden table, vanishing into eager fingers. The healed man laughed, shaking his head. "They believed it, didn't they?" The response came quick. "Easy. Of course they did. They always do." A breath caught, a fist clenched. The truth crashed down, heavy, suffocating. It was a game, a well-played trick, a lie so carefully woven that even the faithful could not see past it. The cries of joy, the miracle, the power, it had all been an illusion. A rage burned, fists tightening at the sides. The people had given, they had sacrificed, they had believed. And all along, they had been nothing more than pieces in a game played for greed. A step back, careful, measured. The night stretched ahead. Dark, vast, but the mind raced. The village had to know. The truth could not stay hidden. Feet turned, moving swiftly, vanishing into the night. This was no longer about faith. This was about justice. The night carried whispers, voices traveling through the trees, slipping into distant lands. Tales of Makoko's miracles spread far, reaching ears that did not tremble at the mention of his name. A man sat in silence. Listening, eyes narrowing as the stories unfolded. The blind see. The sick rise. The dead, almost wake. The words did not impress him. They unsettled him. Fingers traced the beads around his wrist, power humming beneath his skin. There is more to this than meets the eye. A promise formed, sharp as the wind. He would see this pastor's power with his own eyes. The path led to the grass-thatched church, filled with believers whose faith swallowed doubt before it could take root. Feet shuffled forward, voices rising in praise, hands lifted to the heavens. A figure moved within the crowd, blending in, yet untouched by the weight of devotion. Eyes stayed open, sharp, unyielding. A voice boomed above the people. "Shut your eyes. Let no one tempt the devil." The command rippled through the space, heads bowing without question. But one gaze remained fixed, watching, studying, waiting. A shift, a movement where none should be. Something dark and coiling, its presence hidden from those who refused to see. Scales shimmered, catching the flickering light, a body thick and long slithering behind the preacher. It did not belong to the earth, nor to the heavens. It moved as he moved, followed as he spoke, wrapped itself near his feet as though born from him. A presence unnatural. A breath caught, held in stillness. This was not the work of God. Beads pressed against skin, a whisper barely above a breath. This is not holy power. The air had changed, the room charged with something unseen yet undeniable. The voice at the front grew louder, hands lifting, arms trembling. "The people are blind. But I see." The words slipped out, too quiet for the crowd, too powerful to ignore. The rhythm of the sermon pounded like a drum, drowning out reason, suffocating doubt. But the truth had already taken root. The night stretched long, but the mind raced. A plan formed, bold yet necessary. If the power did not come from the preacher, then it came from the serpent. And if the serpent was taken, I must take it. The decision settled, firm and unshaken. A wait began, patience sharpening like a blade. The right moment had to come, the chance to strip the power from where it hid. The next step would change everything. The chamber flickered in dim light, shadows stretching against worn wood. Near the altar, the snake coiled, its presence thick in the air, heavy, waiting. Hands moved, steady, practiced, a slow reach toward the dark mass wrapped in illusion. Fingers closed around smooth, cold scales, lifting carefully, slowly, barely. A breath wasted. The weight shifted, but no sound followed. The movement was unnoticed, the moment unchallenged. The grip of power loosened, though its wielder did not yet know. The sun rose, carrying voices heavy with expectation. A body trembling with sickness stepped forward, waiting for the hands that had healed so many. The voice carried the same command, the same promise. Hands lifted, pressed against skin, words flowed in rhythm. But nothing happened. A pause, too long, too silent. The once healed winced, pain returning, bodies folding under weight that should have been lifted. Whispers broke through the air, a quiet murmur of uncertainty. Something was wrong. Something was different. Sweat gathered, rolling down a tense face. Faith. The voice cracked, hands pressed harder, eyes wide with demand. You must have faith. The words rang hollow, no longer unshakable, no longer absolute. Murmurs swelled, growing like an approaching storm. Doubt spread, slipping through the crowd like a shadow, creeping into the hearts of those who once believed without question. Makoko's power was failing, and for the first time, the village was watching closely. A new face joined the crowd, eyes scanning the eager gathering. The name Makoko had traveled far, whispered in distant lands, wrapped in stories of miracles and power. Feet shuffled closer, shoulders pressed together, waiting. Arms lifted, voice booming, the call rang through the air. Close your eyes and pray. Heads bowed, lips moved in silent worship, but one gaze remained unshut. Skepticism flickered, curiosity clawed at reason. The command had been given, yet hesitation lingered. A slow breath, a careful tilt of the head, eyelids half closed. A glimpse through the sliver of space, a fleeting look where none should be. The light flickered, shadows stretched, and then, movement. A massive serpent, dark as midnight, coiled behind the preacher. Its thick body slithered, scales glinting, its presence merging with the man who spoke of faith. The breath caught, the heart slammed against ribs, sweat slicked the palms. This was no holy vision. This was something else. A gasp escaped, the body jerked upright. A voice, raw with fear, sliced through the chant of prayers. There's a snake behind the pastor. The words shattered the air, turning worship into chaos. Gasps, sharp and disbelieving, filled the room. Feet scrambled backward, hands clutched at hearts, eyes darted wildly. The crowd that once swayed in unity now trembled in fear. The division struck fast, splitting the gathering in two. Some screamed, legs rushing toward the exit, tripping over one another in their desperation to flee. Others clung to their faith, shaking their heads, clenching their fists. It's a trick. A test of belief. Voices wavered, uncertainty creeping beneath conviction. A stillness loomed, but within it, something cracked. Eyes turned toward Makoko. His face, once bold with authority, stood frozen. The hands that lifted in prayer now trembled. A voice, weak and shaking, broke the silence. I was healed, but now I can't walk again. The words crashed into the crowd, shattering the last walls of certainty. A woman clutched her head, wailing. The sickness I was freed from, it's back. The murmurs grew, whispers swelling into waves of doubt. Were we fooled? The miracles had faded, the truth standing where faith once stood. The whispers did not stop. They grew, louder, stronger. Young voices rang out, stepping forward, stepping into truth. He lives in wealth while we suffer. A hand pointed, a voice sharp. We saw him counting money with that healed a blind man. The weight of deception pressed upon the room, heavier than belief, stronger than fear. The walls of trust crumbled. The foundation of worship shattered. The crowd shifted, steps closing in, eyes no longer filled with reverence, but with something else. A figure moved forward, slow, deliberate, voice firm. You must answer to your people. The power had shifted. The hands that once reached for blessings now curled into fists. The voices that once praised now demanded truth. A step backward, a tremble, a bead of sweat rolling down a pale face. The prophet who once commanded fear now felt it, hands lifted. Voice shaking, the once mighty prophet fought to hold his crumbling power. This is a test of faith. The words, once enough to silence a crowd, now wavered. Eyes darted, breath shallow, the weight of the moment pressing down. The devil is deceiving you. Do not listen to these lies. Sweat glistened, rolling down his temples. The grip he once held on the people was slipping fast. A step forward, steady and firm. A voice, clear and unwavering. Enough, Makoko. We see the truth now. The weight of those words crushed the silence, stripping away the fear that had chained them for so long. A child whimpered, arms wrapped around a mother whose tears fell freely. You took from us while we suffered. The voice cracked, raw, filled with years of pain. Fists clenched, shoulders squared. The air thickened with something greater than faith, anger. A step back, a falter. The eyes that once burned with authority now flickered with fear. The whispers turned to shouts, the crowd pressing forward. A hand clenched a stone, raised high, launched through the air. It cut past his ear, a warning, a sign of what was coming. A single glance at the sea of rage before him, and the choice was clear. Feet turned, robes twisting, the prophet ran. The dark paths swallowed him, the wind howling, branches tearing at his skin. Feet stumbled, heart pounded, the night stretching long and unforgiving. Behind him, the voices followed, no longer voices of worship, but of judgment. His power had vanished, his name now spoken with venom. Faster, deeper into the shadows, lungs burning, mind racing. By morning, he was gone. And the world never saw him again. The grass-thatched church stood, but it no longer belonged to the people. Dust settled, the silence eerie, the once thriving temple now a hollow shell. A child kicked aside a broken offering bowl, the sound ringing through the empty space. No prayers filled the air, no songs of praise. It was as if the walls themselves whispered of betrayal. No one dared to enter. Not anymore. The marketplace buzzed, but not with excitement. Faces solemn, voices low, the elders gathered. We must never trust blindly again. The words were heavy, the lesson burned deep. Heads nodded, hearts steeled. Not every man who calls on God speaks the truth. The past had been unmasked, but the future was theirs to rebuild. The fires burned low, the night carrying the whispers of a new lesson. Beware of false prophets. The story passed from lips to ears, from elders to children, from one generation to the next. Listen, but always question. Trust, but never without proof. Eyes watched the flames dance, young minds absorbing the warning. The village had suffered, but it had learned. And it would never be fooled again.